Welcome to episode 2 of How Stuff Works. In today's episode, I will be focusing on DHCP. I will be discussing what is DHCP, and then I will discuss how does it work. When you first connect to the network, before you can start doing things such as checking your email, your computer requires some IP parameters. For example, if Susan wants to do some online shopping from her desk, it's certain configuration parameters her computer will need. For example, the laptop will need an IP address. It will need to know what subnet mask to use. It will need to know the IP address of the default gateway so that it can talk to computers on different IP networks. And finally, it will need the IP address of the DNS server so it can resolve domain names to IP addresses. Now, we can configure these settings manually on our computers, but it's not always the best solution. See, when you're in a large environment with potentially thousands of devices connecting throughout the day, you don't want to have to configure each device as it connects. Instead, you want the devices to learn these settings dynamically, and that's where DHCP comes into play. So DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Control Protocol, and the design of DHCP is to dynamically assign IP addresses to devices as they connect to the network. It will also issue other IP parameters like the subnet mask, the IP address of the default gateway, and the IP address of the DNS server. This lowers the administrative overhead because we don't have to manually configure these settings on these devices. So how it works is when your computer first connects, if it's configured to get its IP settings automatically, it will reach out onto the network asking for an IP address. From there, it will receive a message inbound telling it what IP address to use as well as the other IP parameters to use. So for example, it may be told to use the IP address 192.168.10.1 with a mask of 255.255.255.0. The IP address of the gateway may be 192.168.10.254 and the DNS server is 172.16.10.25. And these are the parameters your computer will use. Now, if you want DHCP to work, you must have a device configured on the network called a DHCP server. His main job is to listen for DHCP requests from the devices connected to the network and issue them an IP address when they connect. And all of the information the DHCP server will give out, like what IP address to use, what subnet mask to use, all of that will be configured directly on the server. So let's take a minute and talk about how your computer communicates with the DHCP server. It's done using a series of DHCP messages. The first message sent is called a DHCP discover message and is sent by your computer. The discover message is your computer seeing if a DHCP server exists on the network so it can get its IP settings. Now this message will be sent to the DHCP server. Now your computer won't know the IP address of the DHCP server, so this message will get sent to the all 255 broadcast address, which is 255.255.255.255. Now, once the server gets the message, it will respond with a DHCP offer message. Now, inside of this offer message will be the IP address the DHCP server wants to issue your computer. The other parameters, such as the IP address of the gateway, will also be included. The next thing that happens is your computer will respond with a DHCP request message. This is your computer requesting the IP address the server is issuing. Then finally, the server will respond with a DHCP acknowledgement message, basically telling your computer it's good to go. Now, it's two things you want to keep in mind regarding IP addresses via DHCP. First thing is your IP address is leased to you, so it's not your IP address to keep forever. When the server issues you the IP address, it will tell you that the IP address is good for a certain amount of time. Could be 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. Like, it really just depends on how the server is configured. But once the lease expires, your computer must request another IP. But 99% of the time, it will request the IP it already had, and the server will simply issue another lease. And the second thing is the IP addresses are dynamic. That's different compared to an IP address entered manually, which is a static IP address. A static IP address will never change unless you change it. A dynamic IP address can change at any time. So the IP address you have today may not be the one you have tomorrow. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our discussion on DHCP. I had a really fun time, and I hope you know more about DHCP than you did before you watched this video. Now, before we leave, let's do a quick review over what we talked about. So DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Control Protocol. It's used to automatically or dynamically assign IP addresses to devices as they come onto the network. And it's not just IP addresses, but other IP settings such as the subnet mask, the IP address of the gateway, and the DNS server. Now, all of this information is given to your computer from a device called the DHCP server. Now, we talked about the DHCP messages used to communicate with the DHCP server. First is the DHCP discover message, which is your computer trying to discover if a DHCP server exists on the network. The server will respond with a DHCP offer message where it will include the IP address it is issuing to your computer as well as the other IP parameters. Your computer will then respond with a DHCP request message where it will request to use the IP address offered by the server. Then the server will respond with a DHCP acknowledgement message, just acknowledging your computer's request. Now, you want to remember that all DHCP addresses are leased and your computer must request a new one when the lease is up. And DHCP addresses are dynamic, meaning they can change, which is different from a static IP address that will never change unless you change it yourself. Now, if you found this video to be helpful, be sure to like and share this video so we can get it in front of as many people as possible. You also want to be sure to subscribe to my channel as well, as more videos will be posted in the future. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.